so interesting is this, of course, ban or divest. You have written at length prior to this, talking about some of the legal issues, perhaps with the government arguing, highlighting in particular two key sentences in the briefing to the DC Circuit that you thought basically cast doubt on the national security arguments. Didn't you just go through them for us?
Sure. So I think some of the key issues in the case revolve around whether or not there is, in fact, a national security risk from the app. And the national security risk, as the government tells us, is that the Chinese government might manipulate the app to push Chinese propaganda, or that it might manipulate the app to surveil Americans. And in order to avoid this, the United States government has been negotiating for the last handful of years with TikTok to kind of locate the data entirely within Texas, essentially, and also put all these controls over that data. But the United States government has been dissatisfied with the level of protection. But the U.S. government says that it has no information that there has, in fact, been any Chinese government manipulation of the app. So it's all speculative. And that's part of the difficulty for the government in this case.
But is potential and speculation enough, ultimately, to argue that we're protecting citizens here?
Exactly. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals believed it was, that the government was uncomfortable, did not trust ByteDance, did not trust TikTok, and therefore could move to ban it from the country if it so decided. And so I think that is, in fact, the question now that will be posed to the Supreme Court of the United States, should the Supreme Court take the case.
Can you give us context or examples in the past where we've really seen courts side with the government in this way around national security, that even though it is theoretical in nature, it's important enough to overcome any, well, rights to free speech?
So this is a very unusual case. There's nothing that is on all fours with this case. The closest case involving foreign propaganda in the United States is a case from the 1960s involving literally Chinese communist propaganda. And the Supreme Court unanimously in that case said Americans have a right to receive Chinese communist propaganda if they so want. So there's not an ideal case. I think of cases around national security, like the Pentagon Papers case, where the US government said it's too dangerous for the New York Times to reveal the secret history of the Vietnam War. And the Supreme Court said, actually, no, we don't believe that. It's not a kind of immediate risk that you are pointing to. And that's what the TikTok's argument is going to be to the Supreme Court.
Do you think that its argument will carry weight if indeed it does get to the level of the Supreme Court?
Well, if it goes to the Supreme Court, I think the same question is going to be before those judges as was before the DC Circuit. Do you defer to the judgment of the political branches of Congress and the president when they insist that there's a national security risk and there's no other way to protect Americans than to ban the app?
What's so interesting is it feels as though perhaps the worries coming from the user base have diminished significantly. And as we're just saying, just a third of US users, or at least US population, supports such a ban. So is there context as to how that might need to change? I mean, you're no marketing expert, but it almost feels as though the government needs to go out and make its case a little louder.
The government tried to make its case for the last 6 months. So the ban has been in place. It has been, the law has been in place threatening this ban since April. And so since that time, we've seen the government say that China controls this app and therefore it's unsafe. But Americans have continued using the app. So Americans have decided that they don't feel unsafe despite the government's views. In fact, Donald Trump started using the app. In fact, Joe Biden started using the app. Kamala Harris started using the app. Every politician is now using the app, despite the fact that it's apparently possibly prone to foreign manipulation. Though the government, again, has said we have no evidence of that thus far.
January the 19th, therefore, it gets banned. It has to be sold. Do you foresee that being the outcome here?
I think that's becoming closer and closer to the likely outcome. that TikTok goes dark on January 19th.